What's a very disturbing fact almost nobody knows? Story 1. Encephalitis lethargica causes you to slowly survive, but not live. After bouts of deep sleep, where patients can be woken very easily, but fall immediately back into the deep sleep, they're left with post-encephalitis symptoms. The main one being that their minds are fully aware and conscious, but they can't physically function, a bit like locked-in syndrome. And they display extreme apathy. They even know they're displaying apathy but can't express any emotions. So they're completely stuck until someone throws a ball at them, which they then can immediately catch. Or until someone holds their hand and walks alongside them, then they can suddenly walk. Otherwise, nothing. So bizarre. Story 2. It used to be believed that babies as old as 15 months couldn't feel pain. As a result, doctors would perform surgery without anesthesia. Doctors used muscle relaxants on the infants to prevent squirming, essentially paralyzing the babies for the duration of the procedure. How long ago was this? Reports indicate that this continued up until the 1980s. A lot of people still believe they can't feel pain the same way as adults. Circumcisions are still done on newborns without any real anesthesia. The numbing cream doesn't even do anything, and the numbing shots are rarely given enough time to even help, because people think when they cry it's just instinctual and not out of pain. Interestingly enough, studies are coming out saying babies actually feel pain more than adults. And MRIs done on newborns after circumcisions show severe trauma in the brain. Story 3. At any moment, a nearby star could possibly become a gamma ray burster and point a jet of radiation at the Earth that would vaporize us instantly. Math says a gamma ray burster, located 100 light years away, that aimed at us directly, would generate the energy of 100 Hiroshima bombs per square mile across the entire exposed surface of the Earth. Anything caught in this blast directly would be vaporized instantly. It would also instantly boil the oceans and rip the atmosphere off the planet. It would end all life and leave the Earth a charred cinder in space. And it is 100% impossible to see one coming, since it's moving at the speed of light, because gamma rays are light. Story 4. If you were to put the entire lifespan of the universe from the Big Bang to the final heat death onto a 24-hour clock at the universe's current age, estimated 13.8 billion years, we would not have reached the end of the first 30 seconds. If you were to go into the far future, past the point where there are no more solar systems, the planets have either been destroyed or become rogue planets, where there are no more galaxies, everything either being swallowed up by black holes or being ejected from the galaxy, no more anything of normal matter due to proton decay, and no more black holes due to Hawking radiation, even here at this point, you would not have reached 12 o'clock or noon on our universe clock. The universe will spend most of its life as a dark, cold, empty void. You would be unlikely to find a single surviving subatomic particle in an area the size of the current observable universe, estimated 98 billion light years across, until the background temperature reaches minus 273 degrees Celsius, at which point entropy wins. Time becomes meaningless, and the universe remains in a cold, dead state for all eternity. Story 5. Due to quantum uncertainty, particles can appear or disappear at random. Usually we're just talking about quarks and other subatomic particles. But there's nothing saying larger particles can't generate. It's just less likely to happen. There is also no intrinsic limit to how many particles can spontaneously appear or disappear at any given moment. Scary answer. This means it is not outside the realm of possibility that you could simply cease to exist for no apparent reason, as every atom in your body simply winks out of existence at the same time. Silly answer. This also means it is not fundamentally impossible, just really freaking unlikely, that your atoms will randomly reassemble, turning you into a giant bowl of tapioca pudding, complete with oversized novelty spoons. Story 6. I knew a guy who desperately wanted to be transformed into a beaver. He was severely disturbed, obviously, and gradually ended up isolated from all of his friends and colleagues. He was hospitalized multiple times from trying to perform operations on himself. Last I heard, he was on his way to China to meet up with a doctor who could secretly fix him. He legitimately hoped to end up with enlarged incisors, a thick coat of fur, webbed feet, and a large paddle-shaped tail stuffed with fat that surgeons could transplant from his belly. There was lots of talk about breaking, sawing, and rearranging bones, as well as being put in a cage. He said he had wanted this since birth. He also hoped to find a partner who was willing to be transformed. Not sure how easy it is to come across such people. The plan was to eventually meet up with some actual beavers and live alongside them. The procedure was supposed to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, which he inherited from a deceased family member. He said it carried a high risk of mortality. The night my friends last saw him, he was sobbing uncontrollably in the restroom of a local tavern. He told us to take one last look, because the next time we saw him, he would finally be a beaver. I have searched for this man online and never found anything. I like to think that he's somewhere out there on the other side of the world, splashing around and building a lodge. Story 7. I was originally going to post this on TIL before I learned their rules. Minimum wage in Venezuela is $6.7 a month. That means that I, who don't have a particularly high salary where I live, Sweden, make about 5 Venezuelan monthly minimum wages per hour I work. Every day I work, I make about 40 Venezuelan months of pay. That's 3.33 yearly Venezuelan minimum wage salaries for every day I work. And that said, the minimum wage in Venezuela was recently raised by over 300%. It was around $2 per month not long ago. So not long ago, I made about 11.4 yearly Venezuelan minimum wages each day I worked. Story 8. Unless you were a nuclear history buff or watched the recent Chernobyl miniseries on HBO, it is fairly unknown how much of Eastern Europe was nearly leveled by the accident because of the meltdown burning through the concrete to a huge water pool below it. Death tolls could have been in the 100 million s in a matter of days, and surrounding cities like Kiev could have been leveled. There was also a high chance from this reaction that most of Europe would have been poisoned through air and water supplies. It could have been worse, but it wouldn't have leveled much of anything. There was a legitimate fear of further explosions damaging other parts of the plant and causing more contamination, and a concern that the meltdown would make it to groundwater and poison the river. Story 9. This one is pretty mundane, but still weirds me out to no end. Horses' hooves are made of keratin, the same material that makes up fingernails. So if you think about it a certain way, horses have one giant finger on the end of each of their legs. The keratin part is true of other hoofed animals, but the thought of something having 2 toes is significantly less off-putting for me personally, for reasons I can't fathom. Story 10. In the 70s, Ford did a cost-benefit analysis and determined that their defective Pinto model would cause approximately 180 deaths, 180 injuries, and 2,100 damaged cars. They estimated the cost of lawsuits and vehicle repairs to be $49.5 million. On the other hand, they determined it would cost them $11 per car, $137 million, to fix the defect in the car to make it safer. Guess what they did? Yeah, they decided, what's 180 human lives compared to more money? Screw 'em. And boy, did they pay for it. The whole situation blew up, no pun intended, further than they expected, becoming a huge ordeal for the company. What's really sad is reading about some of the victims of the Pinto and their terrible deaths. Story 11. Blind people can still hallucinate if they suffer from Charles Bonnet syndrome, which is a common condition among the blind. Also, sometimes our brains will make us hallucinate on purpose as a reaction to lack of stimuli, this being a reason why people claim to see things in the mirror, especially in dark or dim spaces, such as when playing ritual games like Bloody Mary. Story 12. This isn't really disturbing, but neither Alaska or Hawaii was going to be the 49th state. A secession movement was going to create the U.S. state of Jefferson, created from parts of Northern California and Southern Oregon, mostly in response to SoCal being so different from NorCal in economy, culture, geography, and basically everything. Their planned date for announcing and starting the paperwork? December 8th, 1941. And then the day before, Pearl Harbor got bombed, and the U.S. was sucked into World War II. The plans got thrown on the back burner and never materialized. Story 13. Man-o'-wars can live very close to the coasts and sometimes wash up on Atlantic beaches and can look like some loose fishing net or plastic bags. They're like jellies, only 100x more dangerous. Also, grouper fish can swallow a shark whole and can also get very close to the surface. I don't go to the beach anymore. My dad is a master diver. One time he was 20 feet underwater and glanced down to see a grouper following him. He guessed it was about 10 feet long. The fish would follow innocently for a bit, then, when it thought he wasn't watching, drift upward with its mouth agape, clearly angling to swallow him whole. It was big enough to pull off the feet. My dad would swim furiously until the grouper gave up and dropped back. This went on for several minutes before my dad was able to surface. It was at the end of a deep dive, and he needed to get his blood nitrogen levels down first. How my dad kept his crap together, I have no idea. Story 14. There's only one reason dimethyl sulfoxide is dangerous and is the model chemical for why you wear gloves around all solvents. DMSO absorbs straight into your body and into your bloodstream immediately upon contact. It won't kill you at all. It's completely safe on its own, although huge excess is probably not good. It's what DMSO might have in it. It dissolves both polar and nonpolar things like water or fats, respectively. So you could dissolve a totally harmless to touch chemical that is only dangerous if it gets into your bloodstream in DMSO and never know. It also makes it an effective delivery method for medicines that you can't eat, maybe because you're too sick to keep anything down. Bonus fact: you'll know if you've touched DMSO. If it touches your skin, your mouth will immediately taste like garlic. Story 15. Companies like Google, Amazon, and Facebook have been working for 20 years to create an entire new economic model called surveillance capitalism in order to sell you more stuff. This has created an economic incentive to track everything you do, both online and in the real world. In order to more accurately predict what you are going to buy, these companies have decided that modifying your behavior is an acceptable business practice. And as it turns out, you can influence people in a multitude of ways that might even be against their best interest. This is now happening at a global scale and has made these companies extremely rich. To make matters worse, now everyone is doing this. Look up Cambridge Analytica in the book The Age of Surveillance Capitalism for more information. Story 16. Light only travels so fast. When we look at the stars and galaxies in the distant universe, we aren't seeing them as they are now, but as they were hundreds, thousands, even millions or billions of years ago, because the light from them has taken that long to reach us. Some of the things we look at in the night sky no longer exist at all, preserved now only as light, slowly expanding out through the universe. The universe is also not one static size. It's expanding. Its borders aren't just getting wider, it's expanding more like a balloon expands, meaning the distance between any given 2 points in space is getting longer, and the expansion is growing faster over time. Now, what's disturbing about these facts when taken together is that there will come a conceivable point in the universe where galaxies will still exist, but the universe will have expanded so much and so fast that the light from all other galaxies will be unable to ever reach another galaxy. Every remaining galaxy will be completely isolated. Intelligent life could still theoretically arise on planets within these galaxies during this time, but when they look up at the night sky, they will see only what is within their own galaxy and nothing more, ever. They will have no idea that the universe is or ever was anything more than their one single galaxy and the limited number of stars and planets contained therein. With the best technology available to them and a proper application of the scientific method, they will study the nature of the universe and come to the wrong conclusion, only because they happen to be born too late to have had the chance to obtain crucial evidence. All of which begs the question: what might we ourselves have been born too late to see? What knowledge might forever be outside our grasp? Story 17. In the Persian execution, the boats, you'd be force-fed milk and honey, then trapped in a boat with another boat on top, with your head, hands, and feet sticking out. You would be pushed onto stagnant water with bugs. You would get diarrhea and the maggots would show up there. You'd puke and get bugs on your face. Then you would repeat the process until you slowly died, covered in bugs and your own excrement. It took one guy 17 days to die this way. Story 18. A very large portion of major scandals are out in the open for a really long time before they're reported. A story just broke of a journalist who had all of the information we have on Epstein now, and she had it 3 years ago. But ABC refused to run the story. it really shows how much the media is in control. There can be public knowledge of somebody doing something, and the public won't react if the media doesn't push it. If you look at the right places, you can find most of these stories months and even years before they come out. I remember reading about how Facebook was stealing all of our private information and selling it years ago. And then it came out after 2016, and I was a little surprised that everybody was shocked that's what they were doing. Sometimes actors or celebrities will make a joke or reference to somebody being shady, little hints like this that you can pick up on. Shows like The Family Guy have a lot of subtle jokes that predict the future. It sort of makes everything seem fake once you start to pick up on it. So many scandals that nobody even reports on. The media is so fake. Story 19. I don't know if this is a little known fact, but a current theory states that the quantum fields holding the universe together exist in what is called a false vacuum. That is, they haven't quite reached the lowest possible energy level, a vacuum state, yet, and there's some energy barrier stopping them from doing so. So these quantum fields think they're in their vacuum state, but really they still have a little energy to lose. The disturbing part comes in when you consider the fact that, according to quantum theory, these fields have the capacity to spontaneously tunnel past that barrier, allowing them to randomly reach a lower energy state. If a quantum field were to change energy level, the fundamental laws of physics governed by that field would change. If this false vacuum theory is true, this means that at any time, in any place, the very fabric of reality could spontaneously come undone, causing a bubble of absolute annihilation to expand outwards from that point at the speed of light, destroying everything it touches. What's worse is if this theory is true, there are probably already countless bubbles like this expanding across the universe, relentlessly making their way towards us. Imagine, one minute you're minding your own business, and in the blink of an eye, every trace of mankind's existence is wiped from time and space. Story 20. There's a parasite called Toxoplasma gondii that only reproduces in host cats. The parasite then spreads through cat feces, and if a rodent comes into contact with it, it basically rewires their heads, causing them to become cat food by not being afraid of cats and spending time near them. Cats get T. gondii by eating infected rodents. It can spread to humans as well, but there isn't any major threat to us. Although there have been studies done that say that people with certain mental illnesses exhibit behavioral changes when infected by T. gondii. There is also no vaccine for it. It's basically a zombie parasite for rats. Story 21. When I was younger, I went to a basketball camp out of state and didn't pack any period supplies thinking I wouldn't need them. I was wrong. I started my period and it was a heavy flow. I looked and asked anyone I could for a pad or a tampon, but no one had one to spare. I finally asked my roommates, and one of the girls had a spare pad, but it was paper thin. I had to make it last for 3 days. So each day I wore it. It was the nastiest smell in the universe. I get to the third day, and I think to myself, I don't want to wear my compression shorts. My other ones were all bloody from soaking through. So I ended up not wearing them. I get into the basketball court, and I'm on my A game, balling it up. I'm impressing the college coaches that are there to observe. I'm super motivated. Then this chick dribbles up to me to take a shot. As defense, I go to block that shot. She looks down to the floor and says, "Hey, what's that?" Not thinking, I'm like, I don't know, who cares? Keep playing. Until I look down at myself and see that there on the floor, my nasty 3-day-old pad on the ground, displayed for all to see. No one knew it was me. So, that's the fact. I am the one that dropped my nasty pad onto the basketball court. Here's where it gets worse. One of the coaches had to go get gloves and pick it up to throw it away, which meant stopping the game and getting everyone off the court to sanitize the floor. So, yeah, everyone saw it and was aware, and I had to lie to everyone that asked me if I had seen who it was. Story 22. The Earth will enter a phase of runaway heating after around 2.5 degrees, after which we are locked in for 8 degrees. Latest IPCC figures suggest we are going to hit 3 degrees by 2050. The World Bank predicts 4 degrees of heating is incompatible with a global organized community. That means we will lose any ability for climate engineering long before it is feasible. Even if we have a worldwide collapse of civilization, the Earth will continue to heat up. Every degree of heating provides exponentially more difficult challenges to overcome. Even if we begin completely re engineering our economy and industry to fight climate change right now, it is a dicey prospect for survival. We are not going to hit peak emissions until 2030 due to the industrialization of Asia and Africa. People are completely underestimating how truly dire the situation is. Story 23. Donating your body to science doesn't necessarily mean you are sent to some fancy lab and dissected to find cures for diseases. Some of the companies that manage donor bodies trade corpses to the defense services and Army for weapons testing and other explosives as human analog subjects. There was a case recently of someone being unaware their elderly grandmother had been used in an ejector seat test, then blown up with explosives, after believing she'd originally been donated to a scientific institute. Another possibility is that you go to a cadaver farm, where they store bodies under various conditions and study the stages of decay to compare to real life crime cases. For example, left in a wooded area, exposed to the elements for weeks or months. Story 24. Maybe not something no one knows, but one that's rarely contemplated. It's not uncommon for severe car accidents to cause brain trauma and memory loss of up to several years of one's life prior to the accident. This means you could get brain damage years from now, and when you wake up, this moment is the last one you'll remember. Essentially, time traveling in the sense that at any time, you could wake up several years older with no memory of the interim. It's the most disturbing thing I can imagine. It makes you wonder if life that can't be remembered is truly lived. Story 25. If exposed to a vacuum unprotected, the human body would expand, but not explode. The gas would rush out of your lungs and freeze your esophagus and mouth, and due to the vacuum in your lungs, all the oxygen in your blood would vacate into your lungs, then space. You'd stay conscious for about 30 seconds, feeling intense, freezing, burning pain until you black out unconscious, then die as your brain suffers from irreversible damage in the next 30 to 60 seconds. Story 26. Unit 731 was a facility built by the Japanese during World War II in northern China. The Japanese scientists there conducted horrific experiments on living human subjects, including infants. They also spread bubonic plague throughout northern China and Mongolia, gave anthrax-infected candy to local children, referred to their victims as logs, and most of the people responsible got away without any punishments because the United States gave them amnesty in exchange for information. Story 27. In 1989, there was nearly an outbreak of Ebola in the Washington, D.C. area. A shipment of monkeys carried the virus from the Philippines to Reston, Virginia. Workers at the monkey facility were not in full biohazard gear, were infected, and may have spread the virus uncontrollably before it was discovered in the facility. The U.S. Army and CDC took over cleaning the facility. The only reason there was not a citywide, nationwide, or potentially even global outbreak and panic is that the monkeys happened to carry a never-before-discovered strain of Ebola, now known as Ebola restin, that was non-pathogenic to humans. These monkeys could have just as easily carried one of the other three filoviruses known at the time and had a much more devastating impact. Story 28. On the trend of corpses being used as place markers for climbers on Mount Everest, there is a specific corpse that can be found in a cave that is commonly used as a marker for climbers. Unfortunately, when a man who was suffering from hypothermia climbed into the cave and sat frozen for hours, a group of climbers saw him, though he was the aforementioned corpse and he was left to die while surrounded by living humans. No one found out until they discovered there were two corpses in the cave, previously thought to have only one. Story 29. They say every time you remember something, you are basically recreating the memory in your mind and kind of like saving the new memory over the previously existing memory. For example, it's like if you were typing up a Word document and saved it to your hard drive and then later wanted to reread it, remembering a memory, your brain essentially deletes the original Word document memory while retyping it. So every time you remember something, you're not actually seeing what really happened in your mind's eye. You're playing a movie-like idea of what you think you remember. So that first memory of being a toddler you think about occasionally is a copy of that memory. And every time you think about it, you actually delete what happened and reimagine it. Sort of like a visual game of telephone between your brain and your mind's eye. In essence, all your memories are imitations of what happened as many times removed as the number of times you remembered it. I often will hear about something from my childhood that I did and question if I can actually remember it, or if my brain is just doing what it does with real memories and making it up as if I actually could remember it. Kind of sad in a way. But that's why it's easy to create false memories. You do this with even the most authentic memories. So a lot of what you remember is fabricated in an attempt to play it back in your mind, however accurate or inaccurate the previous memory might be. The more you think about a memory, the more that memory is distorted and fabricated.